Okay, welcome. Today we are going to do a little mini lesson on cell theory. Cell theory is one of our three learning targets on the cells. It starts here. The first learning target is I can list the three parts of the cell theory and explain how technological innovations have contributed to the development of the theory. And you can see some different cells and an older microscope on here, so you can kind of see and hint at what this is going to look like. So we start by asking the question, what is a cell? The cell, as the meaning goes, is the smallest thing that has all characteristics of life. Obviously, it has the one that says made up of cells because it is the cell, but it also has all the rest. Now you can see the two pictures here are different. This one right here is of a multi-celled organism where we have all kinds of cells working together and living together, and we have the one right here which is a single-celled organism, and that's bacteria as the picture goes. But either case, they are cells, and they meet all the basic characteristics of life. They have genetic material, they have DNA or RNA, they have the ability to reproduce, they are able to grow and develop, they use energy, they can respond to the environment. They are able to undergo evolution, which is cool because bacteria reproduce a lot, which we get to see some evidence that they do change as a population over time. And finally, they do maintain homeostasis, which is this idea of maintaining a stable internal environment. As we'll cover in another lesson, we'll see some parts that that cells all have in common that help us maintain that stable internal environment. So that's a cell. Now, what does this theory look like? Now, a theory is just an idea that has lots of supporting evidence over a long period of time. So this has been around for a long period. I'll show you that timeline here shortly. But the cell theory has three basic parts. One, the first part says all organisms are made up of one or more cells. Hence the idea of made up of cells. And two, it says the cell is the basic unit of all living things. And there we're talking about both structurally and functionally. It is a building block as well as a functional piece of the living thing. And then third, all cells come from existing cells. Now, like all theories, this has been developed over a long period of time. Development of new ideas in science really are driven by innovation in technology. So as new technology comes about, new ideas are developed, or maybe current ideas are further developed. And we'll see that the cell theory was no different, and that ideas are developed over time and continue to become, I should say, more complex as new research is completed. So that new technology as well as new research seems to go hand in hand. And the cell theory was really no different. As you can see, as we go through this timeline, remember that as technology changed, new research changed. New research was done. As new research was done, this cell theory became more and more complicated. And that is really true in science overall. Now, I'm going to show you this timeline, and really the names, we don't really focus on the names as much as how this thing came about. That one scientist came up with one thing, and the next scientist used their idea, and they kept moving forward, or the technology was advanced because the scientist wanted or was more curious. So it starts off by the Jansens. And the Jansens back in the 1600s developed a group of lenses that were able to magnify things. And so that's where it all started. They were lens makers. And then someone else, this guy happens to be Robert Hooke, who designed a different microscope using lens technology that the Jansens kind of developed, and looked at small objects, including some tree stuff, in this case a cork tree bark, and then found that there was small openings, and he named them cells. So Hooke came up with the idea of cells way back in the 1600s. Now, that's all he could see. This guy by the name of Redi, he took it a little differently. He goes, well, life is here, and these cells exist, but where do they come from? And at the time, it just was thought that it was here. Well, he took it and saying, well, it's not just here. They come from stuff that's already here. We can't just mysteriously or magically make new cells appear. They must come from cells that are already here. And life comes from life is basically what he said. And then another guy comes along in the late 1600s, advances it even further, where he says that he built another microscope. It becomes a little bit more complex. The technology is becoming better. And now he's looking at and finding small animals and bacteria that are living as single cells. So we went from the idea of just small openings, we're going to call them cells, to the fact that cells are coming from other cells that are already here, and that now there's these individual cells can actually live on their own, which is kind of cool. Now, to finish off this timeline, we take it to the 1700s. Not much new there, and then we get to the 1800s. In the 1800s, now we're gonna further that. Now the technology gets driven even further. Now this guy comes along and adds the first part of the cell theory that all living things have to be made of cells, and that of cells and cell products. And then they come in and said, yep. Plants and animals both have cell parts, and yes, they're made up of cells. And then finally, Virchow comes in and publishes the cell theory and demonstrates that cells come from other pre-existing cells. So he kind of puts it all together. And it was a team effort, you know, and as one technology became available and another new research was published, they all kept building upon this theory. So, and that's how the cell theory came about. That's the timeline. Again, I don't get caught up too much in names as much as the fact that, you know, it is driven by the technology of the time and the research that was being done. So, and as new research gets done, the theory becomes more complex, ending up in the three parts of the cell theory. So, in any case, that's it. That's the cell theory, and we'll end there.